Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Hope everybody is enjoying their NBA offseason. That's always full of twists and turns and new storylines. And since we talked last week, a big new storyline has sort of come out, Sap, and that's that the Utah Jazz are actively looking at Donovan Mitchell trades. So typically that would be, the biggest news story, but the Kevin Durant stuff still lingering that we've talked plenty about, the Kyrie Irving stuff still lingering that we talked plenty about. But since we have talked lots about that, let's sort of speculate on this Donovan Mitchell thing, Sap, because he's not that level of player as Kevin Durant, but certainly he's somebody that has proven to be, a really perennial all-star and somebody that in the playoffs can perform really, really well. We know the Jazz haven't advanced very far, but he's had really strong moments in the playoffs. And so teams that are contending teams are really the teams looking to acquire Donovan Mitchell.
Jet, he'd be the perfect number two guy, right? I mean, he's 6'1", 6'2", kind of a combo guard, scoring guard, not a great defensive player, but we see that he's ready, willing, and able to take big shots, elevate his play in the postseason, like you said. So I think he'd be a perfect number two guy on a championship contending team. That's why we hear that the Miami Heat would be interested in Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, their number one choice would be Kevin Durant because he's a superstar and still one of the 5 or 6 best players in the league. Mitchell's a step below Kevin Durant, as you said. But I think, obviously, since Mitchell is much younger, that you'd have a longer career remaining with Donovan Mitchell compared to Kevin Durant. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be teams interested in Donovan Mitchell. We know the Knicks are interested because Mitchell is from New York, and the Knicks are just trying to be relevant at some point. Their big free agent signing was Jalen Brunson, which was kind of a decent signing, kind of a level 3 type player. But, the Knicks haven't been able to really move on and get those big-time free agents in the past. Heck, they've really had one superstar player over the last 15 years, and that was Carmelo Anthony. It seemed like they traded half their team to get him back a decade ago, and we'll have to see what they'd have to give up to get Donovan Mitchell. It would be players and picks, and if Miami gets involved in the sweepstakes as well, it would be the same thing for the Miami Heat. So Danny Ainge right now, who moved on from Rudy Gobert, got 4 or 5 picks, 4 or 5 players, kind of like a Herschel Walker type trade, is going to probably do the same thing for Donovan Mitchell, and then we'll see Utah, Oklahoma City, Houston, and maybe Washington controlling the draft board for the next couple of years because those are teams that have traded off established players for all these draft picks. So Danny Ainge appears to be going to complete rebuild, and he's going to get as much as he can for who is right now his best player by far in Donovan Mitchell.
Right. And, Ainge has sort of 2 options based off of what his history was with the Celtics in terms of how he's going to rebuild. The total complete tear down like he did when, they traded Garnett and Pierce and started sort of from scratch there, or the sort of like rebuild on the fly thing that they did the Celtics did right when he took over. I tweeted about this right after the Rudy Gobert trade, that it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Antoine Walker deal that Danny Ainge completed almost a month or so after he took over the job running the Celtics. He had Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker on the team. They had made the Eastern Conference Finals the year prior, and then he sort of blew up the team, but kept Paul Pierce as sort of the central figure of that team. And then eventually the assets that he traded Antoine Walker for did in a roundabout way lead to getting Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen and Rajon Rondo on the Celtics, which, formed the core of their championship team. So Ainge, I guess, could go the way that he did the first successful rebuild with the Celtics, which is keep Donovan Mitchell and then hope that down the line, those assets that they got for Rudy Gobert, he can trade them for, stuff to pair with Donovan Mitchell. I don't know if another Kevin Garnett type trade would come along. That's sort of a once in every 10 years sort of option. And like I said, the second option, it seems like the more likely right now, which is just a complete teardown, which he's done before too. And, we know that Ainge has been pretty successful at being able to identify really good players at the top of the NBA draft. And if Utah does in fact trade Donovan Mitchell, I do think they're just really looking for picks and maybe some young players, but nobody that's going to help them win. So you could expect Utah to be pretty bad over the next couple of seasons and be drafting pretty high.
It worked out perfectly, the second rebuild in Boston, because he was able to move Garnett and Pierce to Brooklyn for future first-round picks, which turned out to be high lottery picks because by the time those picks came to Boston, Garnett and Pierce were already out of the league and Brooklyn was horrible. So they ended up drafting Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. That was perfect. That was a perfect execution of that. Sometimes if you're trading Donovan Mitchell to Miami or the Knicks, those teams will be good enough to contend. In the case of Miami, I think they could really contend for a title. And then those picks that you get back aren't as valuable as the ones that he got from Brooklyn, which led to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So that's always very, very risky. It's a similar situation to, okay, if Brooklyn trades away Kevin Durant for first-round picks, great, but those first-round picks are going to be at best, 20, 22, if not lower, because Kevin Durant's on a team and now they're a contender. So it's always a difficult situation to be in. You look at a team like New Orleans.
Yeah, the perfect storm, Sap, you're saying, with the Brooklyn picks, that the age of the Celtics players that they traded Pierce and Garnett were really conducive to a short window for Brooklyn.
Right. Or you get lucky like New Orleans, you trade Anthony Davis, and yes, he won a title in his first year with the Lakers, but by his third year, the Lakers are in the draft lottery and New Orleans owns that pick, and it's a fairly valuable pick. So, a lot of this has to do with luck and how the other team does, and you just kind of sit tight and see what you end up with. So Ainge is certainly a guy who's going to be active there in Utah, and I think he's making the right move because Utah, which had good regular seasons, never really broke through in the postseason with Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. We know they didn't get along. So you moved on from Gobert. I thought you got a lot for him, and I'm sure you'll get quite a bit for Donovan Mitchell and just go into a total rebuild. We'll see if it's going to be Miami, which I think would be a really good location for him, and depending on what you get back from Miami. And obviously the interesting part of this is Danny Ainge and Pat Riley sitting down to make a deal. We know they don't like each other.
Right.
There's still that Laker-Celtic thing between those two guys, so that would be an interesting conversation between the two leaders of those teams. Or if he goes to the Knicks just try to be relevant, sell tickets, have a star on their team. I wouldn't call Donovan Mitchell a superstar. And the headline of that would be, the 21st best team in the NBA just acquires the 21st best player. And Donovan Mitchell, I mean, how much does that really move the needle? But, the Knicks, again, can't be beggars can't be choosers. And if they could get Donovan Mitchell, it'd be a win for them.
Yeah, I think he'd be a really great fit on New York. Like you said, he's from there, Sap. He would be the best player that they've had since Carmelo Anthony. I'm trying to, I mean, he's better than Julius Randle, who they have right now. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be, a good story. Again, the Knicks just trying to be relevant. And I think that Sap, we talked about this a little bit, I think years ago, that the reason Brooklyn was able to land Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in free agency, granted that's falling apart now, is because the Nets were able to be just like a little bit good and, a little bit competent. And because it's such a big market that attracted, huge names. So if you're playing that sort of logic, that the Knicks get Donovan Mitchell and, they look competitive, I'm not saying they're going to compete for a title because they obviously won't, but they look competent and competitive. Maybe you're able to attract a free agent and then you pair them with Donovan Mitchell. Then suddenly you're talking about a team that, is actually pretty good. So I think for the Knicks, it makes a lot of sense to get somebody like that because you're banking on just being able to look good, like a functioning organization, like for a couple of years consistently. Like when's the last time the Knicks had strung together 2 or 3 seasons where they were like, okay, things seem like this is a stable organization? Because I don't remember when that was, Sep.
No, just briefly, and I wouldn't even call it a stable organization, but it was a decade ago with Carmelo Anthony. They beat the Celtics in the first round of the playoffs and lost to Indiana in the second round. That's their only playoff win in the last 20 plus years. They went to the finals in 99 and have won one playoff series since. That's how bad the Knicks have been. They made the playoffs 2 seasons ago, and then they lost to Atlanta. And it was exciting seeing Madison Square Garden alive again with playoff basketball. And we know what a great fan base they have and how exciting it is at that arena. But, they haven't really touched greatness for a long period of time. I mean, they were in the finals in 99, got swept by San Antonio. They were in the finals in 94, lost in 7 games to Houston. And, all the way back to 1973 is the last time that they won the NBA championship. So, I mean, it's a very valuable franchise. It has a great fan base, but they really haven't accomplished much in nearly 50 years. But it is New York. And again, if they can get a player like Donovan Mitchell, maybe that leads you to sign a free agent that will be a good compliment to him. But again, I think to really be a true title contender, he has to be a number 2 guy. But, I don't think you turn away the ability to go ahead and get him. Now, what do you have to give back? The Knicks do have quite a few draft picks, so I'm sure Ainge would be interested in those. And also they have some good players. Maybe RJ Barrett is someone that would go from New York to Utah. I don't know what the situation would be with Julius Randle. Obi Toppin, maybe another player. I mean, Ainge is not afraid to make deals, especially early in his tenure. He kind of got gun shy late with the Celtics because I think he overvalued his own draft picks and his own draft choices, whereas I think now he's starting fresh in Utah. So I would expect that something will happen, whether it's with the Knicks or even the Miami Heat, who, are obviously closer to contending for a title than the Knicks. But what does Miami have that would go back to Utah? Jimmy Butler's not going to be part of that deal because Butler's their best player. Kyle Lowry is old as rope. I mean, I don't think Utah would be interested in him. Tyler Hero would probably be someone that would be a starting point of that conversation. And then you go from there with some draft picks and you see what happens.
But like you said, Sap, I think that a lot of people are thinking about the Heat as the logical destination, like you said, because Donovan Mitchell, it's come out that he wants to play for them, and we know that they seem like they're a player away, a Donovan Mitchell player away from competing for or winning a championship. But that Ainge and Riley thing, as you mentioned, Sap, is a real factor. They genuinely do not like each other, and you talked about this a lot, Sap, and I agreed with you towards the end of Ainge's tenure that he has this propensity to need to win a trade 90-10 or 99-1, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's trading with the Heat and Pat Riley, he's not going to give them any sort of leeway. He's going to try to gut them as much as possible. Like he's not going to take a deal that like is okay. This helps the Jazz. This helps the Heat. He's going to want to embarrass Pat Riley in that trade.
And that ain't going to happen because Pat Riley's been one of the best executives in the history of the NBA for a long period of time. And we know how competitive both of those guys are. They were competitive as players. Riley was competitive as a coach, as an executive. Ainge is competitive as an executive. If those two guys went out on the golf course to try to work this deal out, I would like to be the third person in that foursome because that would be very entertaining. You could see fisticuffs between those two guys. They don't like each other. It's not even a made up thing. They really don't like each other. Again, Riley was coaching the Lakers when Ainge was on the Celtics. I mean, that was real. That rivalry, there's nothing in the NBA today that even comes close to that.
It remains real. It's not a storyline.
Really
it's real.
No, it was East Coast, West Coast. It was Magic Bird. It was, it got into racial overtones because, Black America rooted for the Lakers, white America rooted for the Celtics. I was there. I was there for all of those finals. It was intense, man. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about, LeBron talking about what may or may not have happened at TD Garden. And we know what Draymond Green was dealing with in the finals. I mean, compared to what Draymond and LeBron have ever uttered or whatever we're going to talk about, nothing like in the 80s with the Lakers. I mean, that was real hatred there. I mean, that was kind of crazy. But yeah, this would be interesting if they could pull this trade off between Miami and Utah. And you're right, Ainge is going to want to obliterate any other executive in the trade. And that's why sometimes things don't get done. Whereas in Boston now, you've got Brad Stevens, who just looks at the roster and says, okay, I want to get Malcolm Brogdon. Let's get this thing done. What are we going to do? I guarantee you, if Danny Ainge was still running the Boston Celtics, the Malcolm Brogdon trade would have still not been done because he would have been going back and forth over a first or a second round pick. Whereas, Brad Stevens is like, I need this player. This guy's going to help us put us over the top. Okay, fine. Here's a first round pick and some other trinkets of players that they sent back to Indiana. Let's get it done. Whereas Ainge would have still been going, well, no, I'm going to give you a second round pick this year, maybe a second next year, not a first this year.
Right,
but
a
also
protected second.
Throw in this. Yeah, it would get too crazy. I mean, imagine trying to buy a house from Danny Ainge, or if he's trying to buy your house. I mean, just think of the negotiations. It would never end. You'd lose track of what was being offered back and forth. So yeah, this could be interesting with Ainge trading Mitchell to Miami if that happens, or with the Knicks, who are more desperate. The Knicks would be more, I think, amendable to what Ainge is looking for because they really do need to make a splash, and Mitchell would be certainly a splash for them.
Right. Again, so Ainge is really he looks to completely gut organizations. That's sort of his modus operandi, and he would be extra motivated to try to screw the Heat. Like you said, Pat Riley's not going to do a dumb deal but Ainge is gonna, hold his feet to the fire. He's not gonna let, Pat Riley and the Heat acquire a guy that's gonna help them win a championship unless he feels like he's gonna embarrass the Heat down the line. So I do think that is a real story and a real factor in making that's a real hurdle in making a Donovan Mitchell trade to Miami. The team, I tweeted about this, Sap, too, and before we move on to the LeBron stuff and other stuff, the team that I feel like should be involved in this, and I'm not hearing about at all, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, is the Dallas Mavericks. If I'm Dallas, you lost Jalen Brunson in free agency. He was your second best player. You have Luka Doncic, who we all agree is a generational talent. In any given season going forward, I think over the next 10 years, he could be the MVP, or the best, the face of the NBA, best player in the league. But they lack a number two. They lack a number three, honestly. They have nothing. It's a pretty bare bones roster. And yet they got to the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors. Obviously, they fell short because it was basically Luka Doncic versus the world. But Dallas has their draft picks too. If I'm Dallas, what do you have to lose by offering Danny Ainge whatever the hell he wants in terms of draft picks and getting Donovan Mitchell to be the number two to Luka Doncic? I think Luka is good enough. A lot of times we talk about big threes and stuff like that, Sep. I think Luka is good enough where if he has an all-star player, a perennial all-star player like Donovan Mitchell as his Robin, that team's competing for a title. That's all he needs. He's good enough to be able to make it work without, two superstars around him. One star around him, I think that's plenty, and Dallas is suddenly competing for a championship. So I don't know why they're not involved in this.
That's a great point, Jeff, because we're seeing more of big twos rather than big threes because it's tough to assemble three guys because of all the contracts. And, obviously Golden State won the title and it was a little bit different. And the way they're put together is, Steph is the leader. And then you get Clay, who's the perfect number two guy. And Draymond has his role. And then Andrew Wiggins came about and did his thing. And then the young players all kind of chipped in. But that's just a unique situation. But even if you look at the Celtics, they have a big two with a bunch of role players. And some of them are elite role players like Marcus Smart and Rob Williams III. But, a big two could certainly work. And look, we both agree that Luka Doncic may be the most skilled guy in the league. It kind of reminds me a little bit of LeBron in his first 5, 6, 7 years in Cleveland, where he was it and had really not much help, but would still drag that team to the playoffs every year. In fact, got them to the finals in 2007, always made them a contender by himself. You kind of feel that way with Luka Doncic right now. He and LeBron's skills are similar. He's not the athlete LeBron was at that point, and certainly not the defensive player that LeBron was at that point. That's the big difference between the two players. But on the offensive end, he does pretty much a lot of the similar things that LeBron has done for, quite frankly, nearly 20 years now in terms of scoring and passing and facilitating. I think that Mitchell would be a really good fit with Luka. It would be, maybe the worst defensive backcourt in league history, but nonetheless, you would outscore a lot of teams. And yeah, that would be a great landing spot for Mitchell. Dallas made it to the conference finals, like you said, and, just came up short against a better Golden State team, losing in 5 games. So that would be a good landing spot. But, I think Ainge is going to be looking for draft picks and players. And I don't know what Dallas has to offer, but,
Not
how
players.
Valuable. Yeah, the players just they don't have or aren't very valuable. I mean, Utah would have a roster, the players they got from Minnesota for Gobert, and if they got players from Dallas, they would have probably the worst roster in the league. They'd have like 11 guys who were really bench players and then a bunch of draft picks. And, maybe Ainge should go to the NFL and try to build, because he loves the draft so much with all these multiple draft picks. You need some players in the NBA. You can't just win with, 11 C+ players. You're not going to win much with those types of guys. It feels like an expansion team at that point. But yeah, no, going to Dallas would be a great landing spot for Donovan Mitchell, and they'd certainly be a contender.
I just don't see why they're not being talked about in all these rumors, Durant, Donovan Mitchell, everything like that. Like, I feel like Dallas should be desperate to get a guy next to Luka Doncic, because, like I said, he's good enough where no matter what they put on the court, they're close. And if you put a star next to him, they're competing for a title. And I think, like you said, with the Cleveland stuff, you saw what happened. Eventually, you just get fed up like LeBron and leave because the team's incapable of putting a second player next to you. I don't know that would happen in Dallas. It seems like it's a great organization. It's far better than what Cleveland was. But at the same time, how many years is Doncic going to be coming into camp, looking at the roster around him and going, we have no chance. I'm playing with a bunch of D level players. So I think that's frustration starts to set in. So if I'm Dallas and a team that does own most of their picks, I think they own all their picks. I'm really trying to, I don't care what it takes. I'm offering Utah whatever it takes, or Brooklyn or whoever, try to get a second player next to Luka Doncic. And you don't hear them involved in any of these things, which is strange to me.
Sometimes you don't hear about it and then it happens, right? You hear all the rumors of Miami or New York, and then all of a sudden there's a third team that jumps in. They're quiet. They kind of lay in the weeds, and then they get involved. We know Mark Cuban's a very aggressive owner, and he has a great player in Luka Doncic. I'm sure Dallas wants to get back into contention. I mean, they won their first playoff series in a decade. The last time they had won a playoff series before last season was back in the 2011 finals when they beat LeBron and the Miami Heat. So, yeah, I think he likes to be in the limelight, certainly. And he's not running the basketball operations, but I think he can, put forward the message that let's go get a really super complimentary second player for Luka Doncic. And I'm not calling, Donovan Mitchell a complimentary player. He's a little more than that. He's an all-star. But yeah, that would be a good landing spot for Donovan Mitchell without question.
Well, it's like you said last week, Sap, we were talking about the Kevin Durant stuff, and you had Denver as a team that, should try to acquire him. And I agreed with you. I think that's the perfect landing spot. And if I'm Denver, outside of Nikola Jokic, I'll go, what do you want, to Brooklyn? I think that, and maybe like you said, they buttoned up as an organization and quiet about it, and they'll strike when nobody's, noticing it, but they haven't been involved in any rumors. But I think, again, perfect landing spot for Kevin Durant. Him and Jokic could legitimately, even if they gut the roster, could legitimately win a title.
Sure. And you've got Jamal Murray, right? You've got Michael Porter Jr., you've got your draft picks. But sometimes these organizations are really smart, like Toronto. I think we were shocked when Toronto jumped in 4 years ago and traded for Kawhi Leonard. We were like, did that really just happen?
Right.
It just didn't seem like it was ever going to happen. And he was there 1 year and they won a title. So sometimes the team you don't hear about is a team that makes that sudden quick move, because right now everything's kind of on hold with Durant and Kyrie and Brooklyn and Donovan Mitchell in Utah. Something will break, although I'm starting to believe more and more that Durant and Kyrie are going to start the season in Brooklyn. Certainly Durant, because he's got 4 years left on his contract. And look, they're going to ask for the world, as they should, to try to trade Kevin Durant. But Kyrie's a different situation with the Lakers, who may not want to part with 2 first-round picks and Russell Westbrook to bring Durant, to bring Kyrie to LA. And, what the hell is Westbrook going to end up in Brooklyn with Durant? How would that fit? That seems to just be on a really slow simmer right now.
Yeah, the situation with Kyrie is obvious, and Durant is obviously not good in Brooklyn, and the situation in LA is weird right now. You hear conflicting reports about Russell Westbrook and LeBron have, it's a frosty relationship. No, actually, LeBron and Westbrook and Anthony Davis had a phone call where they all committed to each other. So it's kind of unclear what's going on. Actually, this weekend, we have the pettiest Lakers fan coming on the podcast, too. He's a huge Lakers fan, big on Twitter, very funny guy. He's going to join the show. We're going to talk about the whole Laker thing and stuff like that. So we'll save plenty of that for the weekend. But I don't know exactly what's going on in LA, because there's so many different reports coming out about exactly what the situation is with Russell Westbrook and LeBron's relationship with him. And LeBron, it's 20 years later after the start of his career, Sap, he said he's still the central figure in the league, and everything sort of runs through LeBron. A lot of people don't like it that way, but that's how it goes. He plays in the Drew League, and it puts up 41 points, and it's a huge story, even though,
42, don't shortchange my guy.
Sorry, 42, not 41. And, it's a huge story, even though it's, it's essentially a pro-am. And then, he does his show on Showtime, Sap, right? The Shop is on
I think it's HBO, The Shop.
Oh, it's right? HBO? Man, I'm really shorting him. I'm screwing the guy left and right. HBO, much more prestigious.
You have him on
Showtime.
Public access in LA. I mean,
much more prestigious. HBO.
Wow.
But he's on the show, The Shop, which always.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it's HBO or Showtime. I've never seen the show, but I'll just disagree with you because you're trying to shortchange my guy.
So that show also, Sap, always makes headlines. It is on HBO. I just did a quick Google. You're right. Obviously you were right. You knew that, Sap. You're just trying to play quick. So LeBron has made headlines before with this show because it's sort of like a free flowing conversation with him and buddies and stuff like that in a barber shop. That's the sort of setting of the show. And LeBron, is able to be a little bit more relaxed, though it's obviously, there's still staged elements to it too. It's not as free flowing as they want you to believe, but he made headlines twice. First, talking about the Brittany Griner situation, how she's detained and imprisoned in Russia. And he said something along the lines of, if Brittany Griner, if I'm Brittany Griner, I don't know that I even want to come back to the United States. I think people misinterpreted what he said there. But what we want to talk about, Sap, we can talk about the Griner thing too, is he also was talking about people were on the show asking him where's his least favorite place to play was. And he said Boston, because he said the fans in Boston are racist as shit. Now, obviously, we've talked about this, Sap. You and I have, been talking about this for years and years and years, because it always becomes a storyline, whether it's the Celtics or the Red Sox, whoever. In terms of racism in Boston, we know the history. We don't have to rehash all of it. But it is certainly a narrative that comes into play with athletes. The interesting thing about LeBron saying this is kind of twofold. One is that he has actually said before, when this was a story before, that he's never experienced in Boston. That was about 4 years ago. And two, he's a part owner of the Boston Red Sox. So there's a lot to unpack here, Sap. I'll let you sort of start unpacking it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to call him up on full press coverage too, talking about this. And everyone knows LeBron's my favorite basketball player of all time, my second favorite athlete of all time, behind only Barry Bonds. But when the king is wrong, I will say so. And that time has come, because LeBron has never uttered these thoughts for the last 20 years. I mean, the first thing he did out of high school was play in the summer league in Boston in 2003. And then we know how many times he came here as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I would assume, and I didn't do a deep dive into this, but just logically, he's probably played more road games at TD Garden than any other arena in the league, right? Because they played the Celtics 7 times in the postseason, and he was in the same conference with them for 15 years. So he came to Boston a lot. We never heard him say that there were any kind of racist confrontations. I know he had a beer spilled on him back a few years ago, but I don't think it was intended for that. I mean, again, you can hear all different sides of stories, that it slipped and fell or someone threw it, but whatever. The thing that really it has to be looked at, and we know that Boston's had this well-earned reputation of being a racist city, and sure, there's still people that are racist in Boston, as there are racist people in Philadelphia, New York, Cleveland, pick any city in America, is that FU LeBron on a t-shirt, or chance of FU LeBron, or FU Draymond on a t-shirt, or chance of FU Draymond in a chant, those aren't necessarily racist. I mean, the league is 80% black. Right. So many of the great players are black, and you attack the best players. You don't, you're not going to go after Donovan, not Donovan Mitchell, Duncan Robinson, or someone like that.
Or who's in the Lakers? Austin Reeves.
Austin Reeves. Yeah. I mean, so when the Lakers come to town, the vitriol is going to be at Austin Reeves instead of LeBron James. I mean, of course, they're going to go after the best player in the league, the best player on that team. I mean, Magic Johnson heard it. Kareem heard it. Jordan, not so much, because there was never really a rivalry with the Celtics. It was kind of weird, because early in his career, the Celtics were dominant, and by the time Jordan started dominating, the Celtics weren't good. So there was really never a Jordan-Celtics rivalry.
The fans were too scared to chant at Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. Because they thought he might just go in the stand and start beating people up, because everybody feared Michael Jordan. But so I think that's a big part of it. So if people are yelling "FU LeBron," that doesn't make them a racist. Right. I mean, so you're misconstruing that. The other thing, and I'm going to steal this from our good friend Christian Arcand, who you worked with at WEEI, and I worked with at the Boston Herald, and does a great job on the Sports Hub. And he talked about this last night, that so much of how Boston is depicted in movies and on TV is essentially Irish mobsters who are like racist guys, right? Like, really look at it. Mystic River, The Departed, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, The Town, all great movies, but all with like Irish gangsters who have that. Yeah, exactly. All have that weird accent that, we try to rid ourselves of as professionals, I think. But that's what we see the city of Boston depicted as bank robbers, gangsters, kind of wild
Boxers,
men who are racist. Boxers, yeah, they're the fighter. So it's like, that's what everybody sees. So everybody just assumes, I guess that's what Boston is. Everybody in Boston is a mobster, a gangster, a bank robber who's racist. So in their mind, it's like, that's what's happened. Now, have there been racial issues in Boston even recently? Sure. But LeBron never uttered that before. He's been coming here for nearly 20 years. And I think he just kind of went along with it in that setting where it's very free flowing. If I could speak better, I'd be doing a better job. But free flowing, and the only thing that kind of turns me off. LeBron doesn't have to swear that much. When someone swears, and I'm not trying to be a prude here, but if LeBron's a bright guy, and I get turned off when someone swears incessantly, like every third word is F and this. That kind of just turns me off because that's really not necessary. But to get back to the subject at hand. That's my only point is like, why wasn't this brought up earlier? All of a sudden in that setting, it's, Boston's the most racist city. It may be, but, detail if anything has happened in the past. I also think that in some sense, LeBron tried to sidle up to Kyrie Irving, who said this 2 seasons ago in the playoffs. And Kyrie's the guy that he wants to go to the Lakers. And maybe he's extending an olive branch to Kyrie because we know Kyrie performs a Jedi mind trick on every player in the league somehow. And even LeBron, who's the godfather of the league, is like, well, I want to impress Kyrie. So let me go along with the narrative that Boston's racist. And maybe Kyrie will get in touch with me and say, yeah, LeBron, good thing you brought that up. And let's make this deal happen in LA. Who knows? But you brought up another good point. He owns 2% of Fenway Sports Group, which owns the Boston Red Sox. Ergo, LeBron James owns 2% of the Boston Red Sox. Why invest in a team in a city that's deemed racist? And look, the Red Sox have not now with John Henry, but the Yawkey ownership. Tom Yawkey is one of the most racist owners in the history of American sports. Yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff going on here that you have to unpack. But again, when LeBron speaks, everyone listens, and that's why he's still, I think the biggest athlete in America.
Yeah, I absolutely think he is. I don't think anybody is particularly close, honestly, in terms of, at least in this country.
Well, Tom Brady's never really said anything, right?
No,
Tom
that's
Brady
the thing.
And LeBron are the two biggest guys, and Brady now is getting kind of cute and kind of the goofy older guy on Twitter, but Tom Brady never says much.
No, he doesn't. He's almost apolitical, if anything, right. We can have an argument on whether that's appropriate or not in this sort of political environment, whatever. But yeah, it's interesting, like you said, Sepp, his big criticism for Boston, why they're racist is, they have these F LeBron t-shirts and they chant and stuff like that. Like, that's, I don't know that that's racist. Are some Celtics fans racist? Yeah, heck yeah, of course they are. That would be ignorant to say that they're not. But I hate blanket statements in general. Mm-hmm. I just hate blanket statements. And our good friend Mike Molino, he reacted to this on Twitter, and he tweeted at LeBron, and he said, like, LeBron, I'm a black Celtics fan. Am I racist? Because you said all right. Celtics fans. You basically said Celtics fans, which implies everybody, are racist. So, like, blanket statements are just, you never accomplish anything good with them. So, yeah, and if I was Fenway Sports Group and John Henry and the Red Sox, I'd be pissed about this. I don't think they are, because I don't think that they have any sort of real connection with the city or in touch with the city at all. So I probably think they probably didn't even hear about it. If they did, they don't care. So that's sort of whatever, but it is an interesting, another little sort of wrinkle to it too.
They're just happy to have LeBron James as part of their organization.
Yeah,
seriously.
Yeah.
Because whether you like him or not, he's, in my opinion, the greatest player ever. And the fact that he does so much charitable work. He's put 9 figures into education and healthcare in Northeast Ohio. He does incredible things. A model citizen. I like that he speaks up on social issues. I really do. I wish he had spoken up about China, but we know why players weren't doing that, because that's where their bread is buttered, so they don't want to turn away the Chinese money that comes in to the NBA. And again, give Daryl Morey a lot of credit for speaking up a couple of years ago. I supported him 100%, and the man almost lost his job because of it. But yeah, I think that any kind of blanket statement is dangerous. Look, there's 18,000 people that showed up to TD Garden for every home game. Are there some racists there? Yeah, there are. There's members of the LGBTQ community. There's people that are left-handed. There are people that are right-handed. There's Republicans. There's Democrats. There's all different types of people. Should there be more black fans in the stands? Yes, hell yes. But that's a problem in probably a lot of NBA arenas because of socioeconomic issues, right? Where the tickets are just so damn expensive that
price out everybody.
Issue of that. Yeah, poor people can't afford to go to games. But yeah, it's something that, again, when LeBron speaks, we all listen. So do check out the column on Full Press Coverage, because I'm not afraid to criticize LeBron, but it's not like this crazy criticism of never speak again, LeBron. Of course not. I love when he speaks.
Shut up and dribble from
no, not at all. But sometimes you got to call out my man, and I think this was one time.
Yeah, obviously, I'm gonna be defensive about Boston. This is where I was born and raised, and I'm a Celtics diehard fan, and I do not believe that I'm a racist.
I know that for a fact.
So it upsets me. But it is what it is, and this is going to be something that the city of Boston constantly combats, and the onus is on all of us to prove him wrong. To prove LeBron wrong, Kyrie Irving wrong, and that's the only way to sort of combat the narrative is to live in a way that you're inclusive. But I
didn't see anything. I didn't see necessarily any pushback from any Celtics players. And remember when this came up about it seems like, and again when it came up with Kyrie and Durant back in the postseason a couple of years ago. I mean, Marcus Smart's had some issues here. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. I don't think Jason Tatum's a little bit different. I don't think he really gets in the weeds with things. He's very apolitical. Yeah, I mean, he's
also remember he's super young.
He's super young, and again, it's just stuff that doesn't seem to get on his agenda. But whereas Jaylen Brown's much more socially active, I want to see what the player I'm looking forward to not only watching on the court this year, but kind of following is going to be Malcolm Brogdon, who criticized Milwaukee when he left Milwaukee after 3 years, saying it was the most segregated city in America. Well, he's coming to a place. Yeah, he's coming to a place which oftentimes is considered the most segregated city in America. So I want to see how he adapts and fits in to what the culture is in Boston. But yeah, it's look, if it happens, it happens, and let's detail it. Absolutely, we'll be the first ones to confront it. And again, Jet, you remember when Adam Jones, not Christian Arcan's co-host at the Sports Hub, but Adam Jones, the center fielder, played for the Baltimore Orioles, talked about racial epithets that took place at Fenway Park years ago. And I believed him because there were actually fans in the stands who came out shortly thereafter and said, I was there that night when fans were really being cruel and rude to Adam Jones with a lot of racial statements. So there you go. But at that time, of course, conservative talk show hosts in the city like Jerry Callahan were coming out and say, well, if it's not detailed and we don't have evidence, then maybe it didn't happen. I mean, these things do happen. Yeah, the best example of this is, of course, Ray Rice, where no one believed that he actually, hit his fiance until we saw the video. And then it was like, oh, yeah, he did knock out his fiance. So I guess, what we had heard was true. You don't always need video evidence or audio evidence. Sometimes people are telling the truth. So that was the case with Adam Jones. And look, maybe this stuff happened with LeBron, but he's been coming here for almost 20 years. So, he's never said that.
Right. It's different where like the Adam Jones thing happened. He said it, when it happened.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's weird. And again, LeBron, this was, I think, a topic for whatever reason, because it comes up almost every year in Boston with an athlete for some reason or other. Someone asked LeBron about it, and I don't remember the specific details, but he did say, I haven't experienced that in Boston. This was about 4 years ago. He's been on record saying that, and then now suddenly he's saying, it's been my least favorite play because fans are racist. I don't know. I don't really know how to combine those two things into what he actually believes.
In the last 4 years, he hasn't been here often because he's playing for the Lakers. They only come in once a year. So I think he's only played 3 games as a member of the Lakers at TD Garden. I mean, he was coming here 2-3 times a year in the regular season, and then, 7 different times in the postseason when he was in either Cleveland or Miami. Like I said earlier, I can't think of a place where LeBron's played more road games than TD Garden. And to never hear anything, then all of a sudden in that setting, where it's very free flowing with Maverick Carter and other guests there in the shop that, everybody just kind of piles on, and everyone just has this perception that Boston's a racist city. And yes, there are racial elements in Boston, but it's no different than, the narrative of certain cities in America. I mean, you hear that Detroit's a hellhole, and now I know people have gone to Detroit and say, what a cool city. They've really spent a lot of money and fixed up the downtown, and there's great restaurants and clubs, and it's a really vibrant place to visit. And the same thing with like Pittsburgh. People that go to Pittsburgh say, what a fantastic place. You can walk from neighborhood to neighborhood, fantastic food. There's an Irish section. There's an Italian section. There's a Polish section with all sorts of great food and culture. And it's a cool city. And people will knock Pittsburgh as a hellhole, people that have never been there. So that's always the thing. You have to push back against these perceptions that are kind of like dyed in the wool, but they're not necessarily accurate.
Yeah, and I'd also say, Sap, I don't like doing that. We're two white guys talking about, the whole
True.
Racial element in Boston. So we don't have, obviously, the entire perspective on it. I think we can both acknowledge that. But at the same time, it does feel like, like you said, Boston has its reputation based off its history. Completely fair. It deserves the reputation. And based off of, as you mentioned, our friend Christian Arcam is depicting how we are depicted in movies and stuff like that. That seems to play an element into it as well. But there's also look at where LeBron plays basketball and where he lives in LA. No one ever talks about LA as a racist city and stuff, but they've had tons of racist incidents. The Rodney King stuff, the police, we know the LAPD have tons of racial incidents. LeBron's house, if I'm recalling correctly, Sap, was spray painted with the N-word on it. Or his garage or something like that. A mural of his was defaced. So, but you never hear about that in terms of racial connotation. Obviously, LeBron's not going to bash the city he lives in and plays in. That's just, why would he do that? He gains nothing out of that. But it seems like when that happens, when someone spray painted, it's like, oh, this one bad apple did that. But if in Boston, if someone's, someone threw a water bottle at Kyrie up, Boston's racist. Well, why isn't it the same thing applied?
Years ago in Philadelphia, the police chief bombed a neighborhood in Philadelphia, a black neighborhood in Philadelphia, literally air bombed it. I mean, if that had ever happened here, we'd still be talking about it. So, yeah. And again, I do believe there are racists in Boston. We've had our issues, especially in the 70s with busing. And we know what Bill Russell went through in the 50s and 60s. It's horrible. And you had a racist owner in Tom Yawkey who owned the Red Sox. And the Red Sox were the last baseball team to integrate. But, the Celtics are a different dynamic because Red Auerbach was not a racist. They were the first NBA team to have an all-black starting five. First black coach in the NBA was Bill Russell, player coach back in the late 60s. So Red Auerbach was not a racist. But in the 80s, that came about again because the Celtics had a lot of great white players. Well, you know what? Again, the word I'm using there is great white players.
Right.
Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, do you think that teams would have said, yeah, these guys are just out there because they're white. They're really not all that good. I mean, Bird's an all-time top 10 player. McHale's a top 50 player. I mean, they won championships together. So, yeah, at times it gets a little frustrating because it's got to be a little bit more, nuance involved in the conversation rather than, well, Boston's racist, obviously.
Yeah. Obviously LeBron is we've talked about this throughout his career, Sap, especially, the past 10 years or something. He's a lightning rod. So everything he says gets amplified. And he's not the most favorite athlete of most people in Boston. I'll say it from my perspective. Except for you. For me, it's because he's tortured the Celtics for nearly 20 years. That's why most people here don't like him. Because frankly, if you look at politically what he believes in and stands for, most people here agree with him. He supported Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in Massachusetts by a large margin over Donald Trump. He couldn't
deliver
guy.
Ohio, though.
No, he couldn't deliver Ohio,
which if he had, she would have been our 45th president.
People here, for the most part, I think you would agree with most of the things he has to say.
Yeah, and they respect him as a player, but I don't think they respect him as much as they respected maybe Kobe or Jordan, certainly. But that's a whole different argument because, again, I think a lot of the fans that grew up watching Jordan are now in their mid-40s or early 50s, and they're kind of old, cynical people who don't like the modern athlete who's different than what Jordan
those guys
was.
Didn't torture the Celtics for years. He tortured the team. He's knocked them out perennially. The Lakers, with the Kobe's height in the early 2000s, the Celtics were terrible, or mediocre at best. And then they met the Lakers twice in the finals. They beat them once and they lost once. It's, I don't think there was that vitriol towards Kobe. There was vitriol because all the teams in the league, he tortured because he was, putting up 81 against.
And he was a
Raptors
Laker. You put anybody in a Laker.
And he's a Laker, and the rape allegations and stuff like that,
right.
So there was stuff like that. But LeBron stuff, I think, is mostly people here don't like him purely from a standpoint of he keeps beating my team. That's why I don't.
They've played 7 times in the playoffs. He's won 5 series. The other 2, the first time they met in the playoffs was 2008, and then a Cleveland team, which was, I don't think, all that good. They were the defending conference champs, but it was LeBron and a bunch of other guys. Took you to 7 games, and he scared the hell out of you. 2010 was a disappointment because Cleveland was the top seed in the East, and they ended up losing to the Celtics in the second round. But then after that, with Miami, he won 5 different times. And also with Cleveland in his second incarnation, he went 5-0. So, he owned you at that point, including winning Game 7 in 2018 at TD Garden in the Eastern Conference Finals. So, I think you as a Celtic fan, if and this is one question I'll ask, is that you wouldn't really be that interested in Jordan because, again, you don't even remember Jordan playing against the Celtics because there was no rivalry there. But the 2 times you faced Kobe in the finals or the 7 times you faced LeBron in the playoffs, who did you fare more? Was it LeBron or Kobe? I think I know the answer.
Yeah, it was LeBron.
Right. Yeah. Better player. I mean,
better play. We've talked about this before, LeBron.
Our next guest will probably think differently when we have him on,
Yeah, definitely.
Our Laker fan, because they love Kobe. It's Kobe and Magic and everyone else, that's ever played for the Lakers. No one even competes or compares. Although I put out a tweet a couple of weeks ago, Kareem actually played more career games with the Lakers than Magic. And yet no one ever puts forward that Kareem's the greatest Laker, which he really is. Technically, LeBron's the greatest Laker because I think he's the greatest player ever. He's played 4 years with the Lakers. Therefore, greatest Laker, LeBron James. But in terms of guys who played the bulk of their career with the Lakers, for some reason they never mentioned Kareem.
Saying Jordan is the greatest Wizard player of all time.
Right, exactly.
Technically, yes.
Right. He certainly is, but I'd probably say, Elvin Hayes or Wes Unseld would probably be the right answer to that. But exactly. That's a great point, Jet. So, you never hear about Kareem, who again played more games than Magic and won as many titles with the Lakers as Magic. They both won 5 like Kobe, but the debate is always Kobe or Magic as the greatest Laker. And good debate, and I'm sure we'll have it when we have our future guest on.
I think Hakeem Olajuwon's the greatest Raptor to ever play. Everybody says that. But there's always storylines with the Lakers and with LeBron. It's never ending, and that's honestly that's the way the NBA likes it. Perfect, LeBron. The NBA doesn't even have to put any marketing to it. LeBron's generating headlines on his own. And obviously, we're going to talk about it here because it was talked about Boston, but. That's going to do it for us here today, Sap, at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Make sure you check out Sap's column on Full Press coverage about this exact LeBron situation. Make sure you check out his social media and my social media for updates on the show and columns and all other musings and stuff like that at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. And this weekend, we will be doing a show with the pettiest Lakers fan, my friend on Twitter. He's a great follow, so go follow him on Twitter, but we'll give all of his information and stuff. He makes really funny videos and stuff. We're going to do a whole Lakers show, talk about LeBron, the Westbrook situation. We'll talk about who his all-time favorite Lakers are, and he hates the Celtics, so we can talk about why he hates the Celtics so much. I mean, he can't stand them. It's kind of funny that we're friends now, but because he detests the Celtics. But I detest the Lakers too, and I'm not a big LeBron guy, and yet John Sapichetti is one of my best friends in the whole world. So, you can get past this stuff. So.
Absolutely. That's why basketball's great. We put our differences aside.
Absolutely. So thanks to everybody, and we will talk to you later this weekend. Hope you have a good week and try to stay cool because it's really hot out there, especially here in New England. And we will talk to you later. See you, everybody.